The space station of Orion 9 was always loud, crowded, and cold. Ships from 100 alien worlds docked there every day, bringing traders, soldiers, and travelers who never cared about anyone but themselves. Humans were at the bottom of this place. They worked the hardest jobs, earned the least credits, and were often ignored or mocked by other species. To most aliens, humans were strange creatures, emotional, weak, and unpredictable. Among the moving crowds, a human man walked alone. His name was Ethan. He wore a simple worker's jacket and carried a small tool bag on his shoulder. He had been living on the station for years, fixing machines and cleaning cargo bays. Life was not easy, but he survived. He kept his head down, avoided trouble, and reminded himself every day that this was not Earth. Here, kindness was rare, and emotions were seen as weakness. As Ethan passed through a busy market corridor, something unusual caught his attention. Near the edge of the walkway, sitting on the cold metal floor, was a small alien girl. She was not begging loudly like others. She was quiet. Too quiet. Her skin had a soft blue glow, and her large eyes were filled with fear and sadness. In her tiny hands she held a small coin chip. $2 in Earth currency. That was all she had. People walked past her without stopping. Some aliens looked at her with disgust. Others laughed. A few even whispered that weak children of her species were often abandoned. It was normal to them. Survival of the strongest was their rule. Love, family, and protection were ideas they did not value. Ethan slowed his steps but kept walking. He told himself it was not his problem. Helping an alien child could bring serious trouble. Humans already had enough problems on the station. Still, something pulled at him. A feeling he had not felt in years. Guilt. Compassion. Humanity. Suddenly, the girl stood up and stepped directly into his path. Ethan stopped. The crowd around them slowed, sensing something strange. The girl looked up at him, her hands shaking as she held out the small coin chip. Her voice was soft, broken, and unsure when she spoke in basic galactic language. "Will you be my dad?" Ethan froze. He thought he had heard wrong. The corridor went silent for a moment. Aliens nearby stared in shock, then laughter spread through the crowd. A human? A father to an alien child? The idea was ridiculous to them. Some aliens shook their heads, others mocked the girl for choosing a human of all beings. The girl swallowed hard and added quietly, "I can pay you $2. Ethan's heart dropped. He looked at the coin in her hand, then at her face. She was serious. This was not a joke. She was desperate. He slowly knelt down to her level, ignoring the whispers around him. He asked gently where her parents were. The girl looked away. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She simply said, "My mother left. I was too weak." Those words hit Ethan harder than any insult he had ever heard. Too weak. On Earth, parents protected their children. Here, children were discarded like broken machines. He felt anger rise inside him, not loud anger, but a deep, burning one. An alien merchant nearby warned Ethan to move away. "Do not get involved, human. That child is not yours. This is not your species." Others nodded in agreement. Helping her could mean fines, arrest, or worse. Interspecies bonding was frowned upon, and adoption was forbidden. Ethan stood slowly. For a moment, it looked like he might walk away. The girl's shoulders dropped, and her hand holding the money lowered. The crowd waited, expecting the human to act like everyone else. Instead, Ethan took off his jacket and gently placed it around the girl's shoulders. Gasps echoed through the corridor. He did not take the money. He pushed her hand back softly and said, "Keep it. You will need it." The girl looked up at him, confused and hopeful. At that moment, station security drones began to move closer. Someone had reported the scene. Ethan knew this single choice could change his life forever. He looked down at the girl, then up at the approaching guards. And for the first time on Orion 9, an abandoned alien child stood beside a human who refused to walk away. The security drones hovered closer, their red lights scanning Ethan and the small alien girl. The crowd stepped back, creating a wide circle. Everyone wanted to watch, but no one wanted to be involved. On Orion 9, curiosity was free, but kindness was expensive. The girl tightened her grip on Ethan's jacket, as if it was the only safe thing left in the universe. Ethan could feel her shaking through the thin fabric. He did not know her name, her species, or her future. All he knew was that leaving her now would make him no different from the rest. One of the drones projected a hollow voice asking for identification and purpose. Ethan raised his hands slowly and spoke with calm respect. He said the child was alone and needed protection. The drone replied that abandonment of weak offspring was legal under interstellar law. The words sounded cold, empty, and final. The girl looked up at Ethan with wide eyes. She had heard those words before many times. Those words meant no help, no mercy, no second chance. Ethan felt something heavy settle in his chest. He realized this was not just about one child, this was about what kind of being he chose to be. As the drones paused, a memory from Earth surfaced in Ethan's mind. He remembered his own childhood, a small home, warm lights, a voice calling his name. He remembered being held when he was afraid. No law had forced that love, it was a choice. Humans survived because they stayed together. The girl finally spoke again. Her voice was steady now, but carried deep pain. She said her species believed strength was everything. Children were tested at birth. Those who failed were left behind. Her mother had not cried. She had simply turned away and walked into the crowd. The girl had waited, hoping she would come back. She never did. Ethan listened without interrupting. Each word cut deeper than the last. Around them the aliens whispered. Some were curious, some were uncomfortable. For the first time they were hearing the cost of their traditions spoken aloud. The girl said she had heard stories about humans. She said humans were strange, they protected their weak, they stayed with family even when it hurt. She said if anyone in the galaxy would understand her pain, it would be a human. That was why she chose him. Ethan felt the weight of her faith press down on him. He had never seen himself as special. He was just a worker, a survivor, but in her eyes he was something more, something rare. The lead drone issued a warning. Interference could result in punishment. Ethan nodded slowly. He understood the risk. He looked down at the girl and asked her name. She said it softly, as if afraid it might be taken from her too. He repeated her name quietly, as if promising to remember it. The crowd grew restless. Some aliens mocked the moment, calling it pointless. Others watched in silence. Something unfamiliar stirred among them, doubt. Ethan asked the drone a simple question: what would happen to her if he walked away? The drone replied that unclaimed juveniles were relocated to outer zones. Survival rates were low. That answer ended all hesitation. Ethan took a step forward, placing himself between the girl and the drones. He said then she would not be unclaimed. He said he would take responsibility. The words echoed through the corridor like a shockwave. The drone hesitated. That response was not expected. Humans rarely challenged alien law, especially not for someone so small and powerless. Alarms did not sound yet, but attention had been drawn. High-level observers were watching now. Ethan could feel it. This moment was no longer private, it was becoming something bigger. The girl looked up at him, her eyes shining not with tears but with hope. For the first time since being abandoned, she felt chosen. Ethan knew this choice would cost him his job, his safety, maybe even his freedom, but he also knew something else. If humanity stood for anything, it was this: the refusal to abandon the innocent. As the drones pulled back slightly to report the situation, Ethan felt the station change. The air felt heavier, the silence deeper. A single human decision was about to challenge a galaxy that believed compassion was weakness. And somewhere far beyond Orion 9, forces were already moving toward a future no one had expected. Ethan stood still in the middle of the corridor, while the station seemed to hold its breath. The drones had moved back, but they had not left. The crowd remained watching silently, as if they sensed history forming in front of them. The alien girl stayed close to him, holding his jacket with both hands. She did not speak, but her presence was loud in its own way. She trusted him completely, and that trust felt heavier than fear. Ethan had lived on Orion 9 long enough to know how this ended. For most humans who caused trouble disappeared quietly. They lost work, housing, and sometimes even identity, but walking away now would leave a scar he could never escape. He gently lowered himself so he was again at the girl level. He spoke softly, telling her that staying with him might be dangerous. He did not promise safety or comfort, he only promised that he would not abandon her like her mother did. The girl nodded slowly. She said danger did not scare her anymore, being alone did. Those words settled deep inside Ethan. He realized then that strength did not always look like power. Sometimes it looked like a small child standing tall after being broken. The drones returned with a new order. Ethan was instructed to follow them for questioning. The girl was told to stay behind. Her hand tightened on his jacket again. She shook her head, refusing to let go. Ethan took her hand firmly and said she was coming with him. He said she was under his protection. The drones hesitated again. Humans were unpredictable, and that made them difficult to control. As they walked through the station hallways, whispers followed them. Some aliens laughed, some stared, some looked away, but a few watched with quiet interest. Something unfamiliar stirred in their minds. Inside a holding chamber, Ethan was questioned about his intent. His background was displayed, showing years of labor and no violations. The officials did not understand why a human like him would risk everything for a child of another species. Ethan answered simply. He said because someone had to. He said leaving her to die was not strength, it was fear hiding behind law. The officials exchanged silent signals. They said emotional attachment weakened civilizations. They said humanity would eventually learn the same lesson. Ethan looked at the girl who stood beside him, calm and brave. He said humanity survived wars, disasters, and stars because it never forgot how to care. He said that was their real strength. The room fell silent. No argument followed, no rule countered that truth. Word of the incident spread quickly across the station. Humans whispered in work zones, aliens shared recordings, some mocked it as foolish, others watched again and again, unable to explain why it felt important. The girl asked Ethan if he regretted his choice. He smiled faintly and said regret only came from doing nothing. He told her whatever happened next they would face it together. For the first time she smiled fully, not because she was safe but because she was no longer alone. Elsewhere on the station, higher authorities observed the situation closely. They had seen humans fight before, they had seen them negotiate, but this was different. This was quiet defiance powered by care. They began to ask questions they had never asked before. Why did humans value the weak? Why did they protect those who gave nothing back? Why did this small act feel more threatening than weapons? Back in the chamber, the officials made a temporary decision. Ethan would be released under observation. The child would remain with him until a council ruling was made. It was not a victory, but it was not defeat. As Ethan and the girl walked back into the corridor together, the crowd parted differently now. There was less laughter, less mockery, and more silence. Something had shifted. A single human had chosen compassion over safety, and the galaxy had noticed. This choice was only the beginning. The corridor outside the chamber felt different now. Ethan could sense it in the silence that followed him and the girl as they walked together. People still watched, but their eyes no longer carried only mockery. Some showed confusion, others curiosity, and a few something close to respect. The girl stayed close to Ethan, but she no longer clutched his jacket in fear. She walked beside him with her head raised as if his presence had given her permission to exist. The station lights reflected softly off her skin, making her look less like an abandoned child and more like someone who belonged somewhere. Ethan felt the weight of attention pressing down on his back. He knew the temporary release meant nothing. The council would decide soon, and councils rarely favored humans. Even more rarely did they protect those who challenged tradition. They were given a small waiting space near the human living sector. It was simple and cold, but to the girl it felt safer than any place she had known. Ethan gave her a nutrient bar and watched her eat slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear if she rushed. She told him quietly that no one had ever waited with her before. Usually adults spoke about her, not to her. They decided her worth without asking how she felt. Ethan listened to every word. He did not interrupt, he did not judge, he simply stayed. Outside the room, the station buzzed with discussion. News of a human claiming responsibility for an abandoned alien child had spread beyond Orion 9. Messages moved across systems faster than ships. Some alien leaders dismissed it as a meaningless event, others flagged it as a dangerous idea. In the human sector, workers gathered whispering. Some were afraid, they worried Ethan had drawn unwanted attention to all of them. Others felt something stronger, pride. They had lived under alien rules for so long that seeing one of their own stand firm reminded them who they were. The girl asked Ethan why aliens hated weakness so much. He thought for a moment before answering. He said some civilizations believed fear could be controlled by law. They believed if weakness was erased then pain would disappear, but humans had learned something different. Pain did not vanish when ignored, it only grew. She listened carefully, storing his words as if they were lessons for survival. Hours passed before the summons arrived. The council demanded Ethan appear with the child before them. The message carried authority and threat. Ethan knew this was the moment everything would change. As they walked toward the council chamber, the station seemed unusually quiet. Even the air felt tense. The girl reached for his hand, and he held it firmly. Inside the chamber, towering figures of different species waited. Their forms were large, sharp, and intimidating. The child looked small beneath their gaze, but she did not hide. The council leader spoke, declaring that Ethan had violated cultural boundaries and challenged interstellar order. Ethan was asked why he believed his actions were justified. Ethan answered clearly. He said laws that abandoned children were broken. He said strength without compassion led only to empty power. He said humanity had learned this lesson through centuries of loss. The council responded that emotions weakened empires. They claimed survival required sacrifice and separation. Ethan looked at the girl, then back at them. He said survival without meaning was not survival. He said humans endured because they protected each other, especially the weak. The chamber filled with uneasy silence. Some council members shifted, others watched the girl more closely than before. They saw not a burden, but a living question. The girl spoke, then surprising everyone. She said she did not want power, she did not want to be strong by hurting others, she only wanted to live and to belong. Her words echoed through the chamber in a way no speech ever had. The council retreated to deliberate. Their decision would shape more than one life, it would shape how the galaxy viewed humanity. As Ethan and the girl waited, he felt no fear, only resolve. He had crossed a line and there was no turning back. Whatever the council decided, the universe had already changed. The waiting felt endless inside the council chamber. Ethan sat quietly with the girl beside him. Her small hand rested in his as if it belonged there. The towering doors remained closed while unseen voices debated their fate beyond them. Across the station, the tension spread. Humans paused their work, aliens slowed their movement, screens replayed fragments of the incident again and again. A single act of care had become a question the galaxy could no longer ignore. The girl leaned closer to Ethan and asked if the council would take her away. He answered honestly. He said they might, but he also said that no matter what happened, she mattered and that truth could never be erased. She nodded slowly, absorbing his words like armor. When the doors finally opened, the sound echoed through the chamber. The council returned, their forms unreadable. Their leader announced the ruling in a calm, distant tone. They declared that Ethan had violated tradition, but they also admitted the situation had exposed a flaw in long-accepted laws. For the first time in centuries, the council acknowledged that abandonment carried consequences beyond efficiency. The decision shocked everyone. Ethan would not be punished. The girl would remain under his protection temporarily. A broader review of juvenile abandonment laws would begin across member systems. A ripple of reaction moved through the chamber. Some council members showed discomfort, others watched Ethan with new interest. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Outside the chamber, news exploded across networks. Some alien species protested, others questioned their own customs. Human communities felt something unfamiliar, hope. Ethan knew this was not the end. The council had not granted full acceptance, they had only opened a door, but once opened, such doors rarely closed again. As they left the chamber together, the girl took her first confident steps through the station halls. She was no longer invisible. People noticed her now. Some stared, some whispered, but fewer looked away. In the human sector, workers gathered to see them return. Faces once filled with fear now carried cautious pride. One of them placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, saying nothing. Words were not needed. The girl asked why the aliens had changed their minds. Ethan answered that sometimes strength looked like listening. He said humans were good at reminding others of that, even when it cost them. Later, as they sat in the small living space, Ethan prepared food using old earth recipes. The smells were unfamiliar to the girl, but comforting. She laughed softly when she tasted it, and said it felt warm in a way she could not explain. That moment, simple and quiet, carried more power than any council ruling. Elsewhere in the galaxy, leaders argued, scholars studied recordings, children asked questions their parents had never prepared to answer. Why did the human protect her? Why did it feel right? Alien species that had once seen humans as emotional liabilities now faced an uncomfortable truth. Humanity's strength did not come from domination, it came from connection. Ethan looked at the girl as she rested after eating and realized his life had already changed. No law could undo that. He had chosen a path and others were beginning to follow. The girl asked what would happen next. Ethan smiled and said next they would live. He said the future was uncertain, but they would face it together. That night across Orion 9, the station felt quieter, not from fear but from thought. 1,000 minds reconsidered what strength truly meant. A single human choice had sent waves across the stars, and the galaxy was only beginning to feel them. Days passed on Orion 9. but nothing felt normal anymore. The station still functioned, ships arrived and departed, markets stayed open, workers continued their routines, yet something invisible had shifted beneath it all. Ethan and the girl remained under observation, but no guards followed them openly. Instead, there were watchers hidden in systems and screens. The council wanted to see what humans truly did when no punishment forced their behavior. The girl began to change. She no longer flinched at loud sounds. She walked through corridors with curiosity instead of fear. She asked questions about everything: machines, stars, food, stories. She absorbed human habits quickly, not because she was told to, but because she felt safe enough to learn. Ethan taught her simple things: how to fix small tools, how to read signs, how to tell when someone needed help even if they did not ask. He did not train her to be strong by alien standards, he taught her to be human in spirit. Other humans noticed. They saw the way the girl smiled, how she stayed close yet confident, how she trusted without hesitation. Some felt a pull they had ignored for years, a reminder of home, of family, of values they had buried to survive. Soon, other abandoned children began appearing near the human sector, not only from the girl species, but from others too. They came quietly, watching from corners, unsure if this was real or another false hope. Ethan saw them one evening and understood the weight of what had started. This was no longer about one child, the galaxy was testing humanity. He did not send them away, he offered food, warmth, and space. He treated each one with the same respect. Alien observers reported this behavior to their leaders. Many were confused. Humans were not gaining power, territory, or resources, yet influence was spreading faster than any fleet. Debates ignited across worlds. Some leaders argued that humans were destabilizing ancient systems, others feared that ignoring this shift would cost them future loyalty. The girl asked Ethan why more children were coming. He told her hope travels faster than fear once it is seen. She smiled, hearing that, as if she understood more than her years suggested. Council representatives returned requesting observation rights. They wanted data, explanations, rules. Ethan offered none. He said there were no rules to kindness, only choice. That answer unsettled them more than defiance. One council member watched the girl closely and asked her why she stayed with the human. She answered simply, because he stayed with me when leaving was easier. That response circulated across networks faster than any official statement. Alien citizens began questioning their own values. Some remembered children they had abandoned, others wondered what kind of future they were building. The girl species felt the change most sharply. Their leaders faced unrest as young ones asked why weakness deserved death. They had no answer that felt strong anymore. Ethan realized humanity was doing what it always had, changed the universe, not by force but by example. The council finally summoned him again. This time their tone was different, not accusing, not threatening, curious. They asked what humans wanted in return for this influence. Ethan answered truthfully, nothing. He said humans helped because it was right, not because it was rewarded. Silence followed. That idea was foreign and dangerous. The council announced a new directive: experimental protection zones would be created, abandonment laws would be suspended for review, interspecies guardianship would be studied. It was not justice yet, but it was movement. The girl listened to the announcement and held Ethan's hand tightly. She said softly that she no longer felt small. Ethan looked at her and knew this was the true victory. Across the galaxy, the idea of humanity began to change: not conquerors, not laborers, not emotional liabilities, but caretakers of something long forgotten: meaning. Years passed on Orion 9, yet the memory of the first meeting between Ethan and the alien girl remained vivid in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The girl was no longer small or scared. She had grown taller, stronger, and wiser, but her eyes still held the glow of curiosity and wonder that had first drawn Ethan to her. Ethan watched her as she helped younger children navigate the station. She taught them small skills: how to communicate, how to read signs, and most importantly, how to trust someone again. Many species now observed this quietly, some with admiration, some with disbelief. Humans had created a small network of guardians without demanding control or reward. The girl often looked at Ethan and said thank you, but he always shook his head, saying no thanks were needed. Protecting life was its own reward, and saving her had saved him more than she could imagine. Alien species began to see humans differently. They were no longer just emotional, unpredictable outsiders. They were beings who could inspire loyalty not through fear but through care. The station slowly shifted from a place of survival of the strongest to one where cooperation and trust began to take root. The girl decided to take on the role of a mediator between humans and aliens. She spoke at gatherings, telling stories of her past of abandonment and of the human who chose to protect her. She told them how small acts of kindness could change the universe, and how strength without compassion was hollow. Ethan supported her quietly from behind, letting her voice shine. She learned to speak in multiple languages of the galaxy, and yet she always returned to the one that humans had taught her, the simplicity of unity and honesty. One day, as the girl stood before a gathering of mixed species, she pointed to Ethan and said that humans were capable of the impossible not through power but through heart, that courage was measured not by how many could be defeated but by how many could be uplifted. She said that choosing to protect the weak was the true path to greatness. The assembly listened in silence, and for the first time many aliens questioned what their civilizations had taught them. They realized that laws could be rewritten, that cultures could change, and that hope was more contagious than fear. Back at their living quarters, the girl asked Ethan if he ever regretted his choice. He smiled and said that every choice he had made had led them here, that seeing her grow strong and respected had made all the risk worthwhile. She nodded, knowing that the bond they shared had not only saved one life but had sparked a movement. Across the galaxy, humans began to be seen as catalysts of change. They were invited to councils, consulted on juvenile care, and even trusted with diplomatic missions, not because they demanded authority, but because their example had proven that caring could be a force more powerful than any weapon. The girl became a symbol of this new era, a reminder that even the smallest voice could alter the course of civilization. She often said that she was once abandoned and alone, but now she belonged not just to Ethan but to a universe learning to embrace compassion. Ethan realized that the greatest power humans had was not their technology or their strength, but their ability to choose empathy even when it was costly. He saw that the girl had become everything he had hoped to protect and more. She was a bridge between species, a living proof that humanity could shine brightest in the darkest corners of the galaxy. As the sun rose over Orion, 9 ships glided through the docking bays. Children laughed across markets, and humans and aliens worked side by side. Ethan looked at the girl and knew that their story would be told for generations, not as a tale of conflict but as a story of hope, a story of HFY. The girl smiled at him and whispered that she was proud to call him father, and Ethan felt a warmth he had never known. The galaxy had learned that strength was more than survival, that love and courage could reshape worlds, and that humanity had finally shown what it meant to be truly extraordinary. The stars above Orion 9 glimmered as if in agreement, and somewhere far beyond the station countless beings across countless worlds carried the lesson forward that a single choice to protect the weak could ignite a revolution of compassion. And in that moment the galaxy understood the true power of humanity.